Pledge. I pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I have a roll call of supervisors, please? All supervisors are present. Moving on to citizen comments. Any citizens wishing to speak, please step up to the mic. You have 5 minutes. State your name and address for the record. Let me turn you on 1 second, please. 1 second, please. There you go, sir. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ali Nelson. I reside at 7225 150th Avenue, Kenosha, Wisconsin. I'm a citizen, and I'm also the County Veteran Service Officer for 13,500 veterans in Kenosha County. Last night, you witnessed several veterans came out and spoke about the Kenosha County Veterans Memorial Park. Currently, we don't have a park like that in Kenosha, and so it would be a nice thing to do if we vote on that to make it a reality. And not only for veterans who have served this country and have gone on before us, but also for future generations. Our children, grandchildren could have a place that they can go out and find out a little bit about military heritage and history, and could ask questions, and that we can provide answer. If you've never been out to that park is a special place. And I think it's a most appropriate place to call Veterans Memorial Park. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other citizens' comments? Hello. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Linda Hughes, 4819 33rd Avenue, Kenosha, Wisconsin. The reason why I'm speaking tonight is because our insurance is going to be changed, and they want us to pay 10% of it. I would like for it to stay the same. I'm a single parent. We haven't had a raise since 2014. The union was, of course, disbanded, and I don't think it's fair. Like I said, I have to work 2 jobs now. We haven't gotten a raise. Everything is increased, food, clothing, housing expense, all of that. And I just don't think it's fair that we have to bear the burden of this. We've already started, we pay our insurance, we pay into our pension as it is right now. And now they want to take another one, give us a raise for 2%, but then take 1%. We're not getting anything out of that. It's not fair to us as the workers. We're working, but other departments are still getting raises. Other companies are still getting raises. Even like Gateway, their employees still get raises, and their union's been disbanded, but we haven't gotten one. We got 25 cents. That's not a lot, and that's not fair to us, because we're still, other Kenosha employees, some of them are getting raises. And then I hear that we get our step increase raise. Yeah, but when you get to the limit of where our step increase raise is, we don't get any more raises since then. We get our reviews, we get, okay, you're good, this needs to be improved, or this doesn't. But we don't get any other incentives. We don't get any more vacation, because we used to get five weeks when we got to 20 years. We don't get that anymore. That was cut out. We don't get anything else, like for the insurance, any incentives. And then now they're talking about taking away like certain things from what we have to do in order for our insurance to stay low. We're doing all of that to make sure that our insurance doesn't go up. And I work on mine all the time. And then when you have children that have reached a certain age, 18, they have to do that. So they're doing it. And now you tell us, okay, we want to do 90-10, we want to do 10% for the employees and 90%, and then they want to change it again the following year. And then that's just more money coming out of our pockets. Where does it stop? It's not fair. I just don't think it's fair. That's it.
Thank you. Any other citizens' comments? Any other citizens' comments? Citizens' comments? Seeing none, citizen comments are closed. Moving on, announcements of the chairman. Again, I would like to thank the county executive and the administration for the budget they brought forward. As I said last night, it's definitely been a challenging budget. I appreciate all the hard work from the department heads. I appreciate all the hard work from the finance director, Patty Merrill, and the budget director, Marna Bench. and all the supervisors that have partaked in the discussion. I appreciate the amount of supervisors that were at committee meetings that weren't theirs. I appreciate all the supervisors that were at the Finance Administration Committee that weren't seated on that committee. And with that, we will move on with supervisor reports. Any supervisor reports? Seeing none, supervisor reports are closed. County Clerk.
County Executive Appointments, Laura Belsky to serve on the Racine Kenosha Community Action Agency.
Refer to Human Services Committee.
Kurt Gardner to serve on the Kenosha County Local Emergency Planning Committee.
Refer to Judiciary and Law Committee.
Policy Resolution, second reading to required. From the Finance and Administration Committee, Policy Resolution 2020, Kenosha County Budget. Rose, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. Gens, yes. Kubicki, yes. O'Day, yes. Poole, yes. Wamble, yes.
Thank you. Supervisor Rose, you have the floor.
I would move the budget resolution.
Thank you. I have a motion by Supervisor Rose and a second by Supervisor Ron Frederick. Supervisor Rose.
All right, thank you. I hope you've had a chance overnight to take a look at the memo that was prepared, which details some of the changes in the budget that took place over the 4 days of Finance Committee hearings. I want to emphasize this evening that this budget is a compromise document. It may not include everything that you support. It may not be your best hope, but it is a compromise developed by a number of people of diverse opinions who have brought forward resolutions and amendments to the budget. So in voting for it this evening, I urge you to keep in mind that compromise, in my view, is the way to go in passing legislation. If we're going to stick with our own opinion and not listen to anybody else and come to a compromise, there won't be any. So some of the compromises that were made and which I support this evening have to do with bonding. $750,000 was deleted from the bonding for Kenosha County. There has been a concern over some period of time that we were borrowing too much, that bonding ought to be cut, and for the very first time we have cut some $750,000 of bonding, and we urge that you support that this evening. There was controversy connected with the vehicles that the Sheriff's Department was going to purchase. There was some feeling that the sheriff ought to stick with the traditional squad cars. The sheriff was proposing pickup trucks, and he had purchased those with the last budget money and proposed to do it with this new budget. In the end, it was the judgment of the committee that while we have the authority to put restrictions on the expenditure of money, that we ought to repose the discretion in the hands of the sheriff, that he runs the department, and we supported that, and we deferred to his judgment. We felt that the sheriff would be acting in the best interests of the general public, and so we deferred to his judgment, even though we understand that as a board we can place restrictions on the purchases of squads versus trucks. In the area of wages, there is a 4% wage increase in 2020 to be awarded to employees on their anniversary date based upon the midpoint range. If you are a red, what they call a red circled employee, in other words, your wages are at the top of the chart, there is a 2% increase. And then in 2020, at the beginning of the year, there's an additional, 2021, there's an additional 1%. The thought in mind that we would deal with wages for both 2020 and 2021, and that we would make that decision this evening, and that we would not be reviewing that once again when the budget comes before the Finance Committee for consideration next year. We also left on your desk the history of salary increases for Kenosha County employees from 2010 to 2019. I urge you to take a look at that because it explains in detail what we have done over the years. There's been some statements made that 25% per hour was all that was given to employees. Now, if you read this history of salary increases, you will see what the accurate decisions are of this board and the administration from 2010 to 2019. On other issues that the committee came to decisions, we're supporting the Veterans Park. There was no opposition to that in committee, and I urge your support for that this evening as well. There were other cuts in the operations budget, which we set forth last evening, and I'm not going to reiterate what those were, but they amount to approximately $200,000 in the operations budget. We've saved money on wages. We've saved money on health insurance. What the health insurance, in summary, is that it does contain some substantial redirection of what we're doing with health insurance. First of all, for single policy, it's $500 deductible. For married, it's a $1,000 deductible. Your out-of-pocket expenses, the 90-10, which you've heard discussed this evening, is only for up to $6,000 for a single person and $12,000 for a married couple. After that, there's no 90-10. It's 100% by the health insurance policy. So those are still very generous benefits. Those benefits, I think, probably exceed what most businesses have. So it isn't 90-10 across the board. It's only up to the out-of-pocket, again, $6,000 individual, $12,000 for a couple, deductibles of $500 and $1,000. So we were informed by the Human Services Department, or Human Relations Department, that this is going to save the county money, and so the committee supported it. I think those are some of the major controversial issues, if you will, that were in the budget, and we urge you this evening to support this budget as presented by the Finance Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rhodes. We do have discussion. Supervisor Kubicki, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you all know, I am the Executive Director of Kemper Center Incorporated. Since taking that position last year, I've taken great care to remove myself from any county board or any county board committee actions or discussions regarding not only Kemper Center, Inc., but the Kemper property itself. I feel that is appropriate to ensure that there is not even a perception of a conflict of interest. Accordingly, I'm advising that I will not engage in any debate related to Kemper, and when I cast my vote in favor of this budget this evening, it includes an abstention on all those portions involving appropriations for Kemper, and I ask that the record reflect that, please. Thank you.
Yes, sir. The record will do so. Supervisor Gantz, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to be clear, although Supervisor Rose mentioned bonding, we're not taking up bonding in the budget resolution, correct? Is that correct?
Well, bonding sits on its own,
Right.
but it's all wrapped up in part of the, part of it.
Okay.
Right.
I just wanted to make that clear. Okay.
That's clear.
I also want to, at this point, make a motion to put in the budget resolution that the sheriff take the direction of the board and purchase SUVs or sedans rather than trucks. So I'd like the budget resolution to reflect that. That is my amendment.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor to, correct me if I'm wrong, Supervisor Gantz, to dictate the sheriff buy SUVs, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do I have a second? Second by Supervisor Rodriguez. Okay, we're going to have some discussion. I'm going to clear the board. Any supervisors have any discussion on this item? Supervisor Rose.
The committee fleshed out this issue, I believe, in the hearings that we had. You know, are you going to micromanage this or not? If we find that it's unsuccessful, that for some reason it's not a good idea, and I don't know what that argument might be, but you'll certainly find out in the forthcoming year. Some of those trucks are going to be on the road very soon. Perhaps they're on the road right now, but they were being outfitted at the time that the committee met. That can be addressed. I don't know what the argument is for squads versus trucks, but the committee felt that, again, we were going to let the sheriff do the job that he was elected to do. We don't try to micromanage the county clerk or the clerk of the circuit courts, register of deeds, but from time to time on big issues, we do address them like we did with the treasurer on the tax delinquent properties. We certainly can do that with any department, put any restrictions on here, but this is what the sheriff supported, and this is what the committee felt was the right thing to do, and let the sheriff do his job.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Poole, you have the floor.
Thank you. I support the Sheriff's Department buying whatever vehicles they want, and I personally like the trucks, so I will not be supporting that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Boyd Frederick, you have the floor.
Many of the same things that Supervisor Rose just said. We went over it in judiciary law and said the same things in our committee, that let the sheriff buy what he seems that he wants to buy. If he thinks trucks is what he needs, then trucks is what he should get.
Okay. Thank you. Supervisor Ron Frederick, you have the floor.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I support the sheriff's decision to buy whatever vehicles that he thinks would serve him. I did raise a question about mileage on trucks versus SUVs, and he said that actually the trucks get better mileage than the SUVs, so I won't be supporting this motion.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other discussion on this item, there's been a roll call requested. So, yes, if you're in favor of the amendment to...
Give us a second.
Oh, give us 1 second to speed this up, please.
She's got it.
You okay? Okay, so everyone's clear, yes, if you're in favor of the amendment to limit the sheriff, I would assume his jurisdiction in purchasing where he would only have to buy SUVs. No, if you're not in favor of the amendment. That amendment fails. Moving on. Supervisor Noodle, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to congratulate everybody that was involved in the budget process. There were many hours put in. Just about every supervisor tried to put in their ideas, suggestions. There were a lot of discussions. I don't believe that this is the perfect budget for any of us here tonight. However, I believe that's the best budget we could come in at this time. And for that reason, I think we should all support it and go on with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Noodle. Supervisor Poole, you have the floor.
Thank you. One concern I have on this budget is the 6% increase in human services, specifically the workforce development. And I figure if we can't cut workforce development right now when we have the best economy ever, when can we? So I'd like to make a motion to cut one staff from workforce development.
Can you repeat that, please?
I'd like to make a motion to cut one staff from workforce development,
There's a
since
motion
we're in
on the
such a
floor.
great economic environment.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion on the floor to cut one staff member, and there was a second by Supervisor Skalitsky. So I'm going to clear the board here, and we can start discussion if we need to on this item. Any discussion from any supervisors on this item? Seeing no discussion. There's been a roll call requested. So yes, if you're in favor of cutting one staff member from the budget as presented by Supervisor Poole, no if you are not. That amendment fails. Moving on. Supervisor Gens, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I would like to make a motion to put the bonding back into the budget and the bonding resolution.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I do have a second. So right now, we are on the amendment to put the roughly $750,000
right.
back into the budget that was taking out of the budget at the Finance Committee on bonded money. So I'm going to clear the board.
And who was the second?
Second by Supervisor Alvarez. And Supervisor Gens can lead us out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I sat and deliberated on the Finance Committee, one of the supervisors that was in attendance kept saying, tell it like it is. Make sure you're telling the people what's really going on. That was said about 3 or 4 times. And I couldn't agree more. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit right now about bonding. Okay, when you have proposed bonding, there's 2 things you can do with it. Number 1, you can cut it, okay? That means you're taking the bonding out. That means we're not bonding for it. We're saving, debt service. We're actually cutting spending. That is not what we're doing here by taking the $750,000 out. So last night when Chairman Rose stated that on the committee we decreased the bonding, which will help the tax levy in the future and be a positive thing for the taxpayers, that was not correct. Because you have to cut bonding to make that an effective statement and a true statement, okay? What we did was defer bonding. Now, we chose to defer bonding at a time when interest rates are at an all-time low. As a matter of fact, Ellers came up and said, the interest rates are at a historic low. I said, oh, really? So I don't know how many people on this board want to gamble with taxpayer money that in 2 years when we go out to bond for what we're going to have to bond for anyway, that rates will be at this historic low. I would venture to say that they're not going to be. Not only do you have that, you have the cost of the project going up, you have the cost of repairs in that project, so you're spending even more money. So to say we're doing a service to the taxpayer by deferring bonding is not correct. To cut bonding would be like cutting the sheriff's trucks out for this year. That would be an example of cutting bonding. So what we're doing is we're deferring things to next year, which we have to do. I mean, pieces of a roof and a central vac system. That's not good stewardship with the money. And no matter how you vote on removing this bonding, I think in your hearts you know that's correct. I have not in 12 years taken a vote that I feel is not good for the county. This is one that is. So to say you're cutting spending, that's not true. You're deferring bonding and gambling with the taxpayers' money that at the time you go to do these projects, which you're going to start next year anyway, that you'll be able to get the money at the same price and that there will be no increase in labor or materials and there will be no repairs done. So I don't know how I've talked to, out of the 12 years I've been on the board, 4 chairmen of the county board Chairman Clark, Chairman Brunig, Chairman Molinaro, and myself. I talked with all of them, and we all think deferring bonding is not a good idea. So you want to cut budgets, you want to cut bonding, that's fine. But to defer it is not a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gens. Supervisor Rose, you have the floor.
The committee decided, and this was in the memo that was left on your desk, we revised the capital budget by decreasing expenditures by $750,000 and bonding by $750,000. And it affects the Sheriff's Department, parks, golf, and facilities. What we do next year, I don't know. That's for another board, another committee to deal with. But it's not a deferral, it's a cut in expenditures and a cut in bonding. Now, it's not like we're spending a small amount of money here. We're spending capital improvements, $22.1 million, and bonding for $26.75 million in capital expenditures here. Of which the over $4 million is funded by grants and intergovernmental revenue. So, you can hardly say that we're being quite conservative. There's a lot being bonded for here, and I suggest that cutting this by $750,000, and this is what the committee's decision is, and that's what I'm promoting is what the committee has decided. And I understand Mr. Gens made the very same arguments in committee, is an approach here that recognizes the concerns of some people on the board that bonding was too much. It's a compromise. It's a deal was made, and I'm going to stick with that, and I urge you to stick with that, because if you don't, there's a question about whether or not some of these things are going to pass at all. Because compromises unravel, and then what do? You don't have the requisite votes to pass it. So, committee decided 750. That was what was the compromise. I urge you to support that and pass this budget as opposed to create some chaos.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Alverman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to support Supervisor Gens's motion. May have to speak more than once here. There's probably going to be a lot of discussion, but I understand deals being made, and I understand that at the meetings I was at, people wanted to reduce bonding. But there are ways, and there's responsible ways to do it, and that isn't throwing a dart and picking a number. You'll have to excuse me, but that's what happened here. Their target was $1 million, so a settlement was made after it was approved at Finance the night I was there and approved at my committee for the $750. But the way it was done was very reckless. It's a disservice to taxpayers, and it's irresponsible to take this chance. And I'm going to explain it briefly. We don't just pull this out of the sky when we put together a 5-year plan on where money is going to have to be spent. I reported for years about our roof plans. We have a scoring system for our highways. The roofs were put in order of importance, and the detention center is coming up. Prior to doing that, the 23 to 25-year-old air conditioning units are way past their life of about 15 years. So, we naturally don't want to have these air conditioning units with cranes, people, boots, welding, everything that takes place, to be put in after the roof. Now, if that roof fails, there's a whole lot goes into that building. For one thing, it's a very high revenue source for the county and the Sheriff's Department. I think it's the highest for the Sheriff's Department. The federal government's very precise on conditions. That's where my term reckless comes in. You are taking a big chance, you're using a Ouija board to pick this number. Now, it wasn't important where it came out of. It couldn't have been important to the committee or the people at that final meeting, because you would have had to done a little homework and say, is this a real good spot to pull that 750 or 500 of that? Is that a real good spot to do it? Well, I'm kind of tired, so I guess, yeah, that's a good spot. That's the way it looks, folks. So, you want to cut bonding? Don't look in the eye of the people that we pay very good money for to give us the advice on our facilities and our buildings. Then the people that we hire as consultants to put this order together and then say, well, we just have to rely this year on luck. That's it. I'm telling you, it's a reckless chance, and I'm supporting this amendment to put it back in. I also have talked to, I heard it was said that, well, these people come from conservative areas, and so they got to, we've got to cut some money here. Well, I come from a conservative area also, and most of my acquaintances and business relationships are also conservative. We have to be to stay in business. And I talked to a few of them since that meeting took place 2 weeks ago. And there really isn't one of them that thinks Kenosha County is squandering, and there isn't one of them that thought it was a wise idea at the percentage of bonding that Kenosha County has available to it to not repair your infrastructure and take care of your infrastructure that they paid dearly for. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Overman. Supervisor Gens, you have the floor again.
I'll wait till everybody else talks. Supervisor Gaschke can.
Okay. Supervisor Gaschke, the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me start off by saying that I do generally support the philosophy of doing the heavy lifting on this budget in committee. I generally believe that is best practice. But that being said, since this motion has been made tonight, I would like to speak on its behalf. The decisions we're making tonight are important ones, and I think that it's a good thing we're discussing and carefully considering different perspectives so that we can arrive at the best decision for our community. It's not our money that we're talking about, it's our constituents' money, our taxpayers' money. And as a board, we have to strive to be good stewards, good caretakers of the resources that we've been entrusted with. And I, like most people, don't believe that our taxes should be any higher than they need to be, nor do I believe that our expenses should be any greater than are necessary. So in other words, I believe in fiscal responsibility. And that is exactly why I am in favor of Supervisor Gens's amendment tonight to restore the funding back into the 2020 budget. I don't intend any disrespect toward any of my colleagues, but I do believe that the budget deferral approved by the Finance Committee will produce a short-term gain, but actually create a greater long-term loss in the end. By cutting this funding now from our 2020 budget, we're deferring necessary maintenance and repairs, which will inevitably lead to higher costs to accomplish the same results in the future. And it will also inevitably cost us more in the future to borrow the necessary funds in order to complete these needed projects. These proposed purchases and projects and repairs, they're not frivolous wishes. They're prudent recommendations and requests based upon the professional opinions of our dedicated county employees. Not only are the bonding interest rates at historic lows, making borrowing funds now a wise decision, but cutting this funding now will also lead to inefficiencies and reduplication of labor in the future, ultimately costing our taxpayers more money in the long run. I do fully understand that these cuts were proposed out of a desire to help gain consensus and build support for the overall budget and the bonding process, and I do respect and appreciate that desire. I'm not opposed to compromise when possible, nor am I opposed to cuts when feasible. I'd also like to believe that everyone here on this board ultimately has the best interest of our community at heart, and we just may differ in our opinions on what that may look like. But for me personally, I believe that these cuts present a mere illusion of short-term gain, but will ultimately cost us more with long-term pain. Although on the surface it may appear to some that these cuts are good for our taxpayers, I believe the exact opposite is true due to the added costs of deferred maintenance and the expenses of future borrowing. So that being said, I realize promises and agreements may have already been made, so even if Supervisor Gentz's amendment tonight fails, I do want to assure the board that my intention at this point is to support the budget tonight. And I also further plan to support the bonding as well, because even though I don't necessarily agree with the cuts, I think it would be inappropriate and irresponsible to approve a budget without supporting a mechanism to fully fund it. So in conclusion, with the best interests of our community in mind and with the utmost respect to my board colleagues, I will be voting in favor of Supervisor Gentz's amendment, and I urge the rest of the board to consider doing the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Gentz, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Boy, that was well said. I just want to respectfully disagree with Supervisor Rose. He says that, finance already deliberated on this and we had to cut a deal. And, the night before when all the members of staff were there, it passed 6-1, the bonding. So, yeah, there was some deliberation. And at one point, all of us thought the bonding was a good idea. But all of a sudden, the next night, it wasn't. And to sit there and I mean, it's really disingenuous to say, well, the next board can do whatever it wants. That's not true. You're starting a roof project with $500,000 of the money you want to not cut, defer. So you're starting the project. So to say next year, we could cut that $500,000 again. No, you can't. You started the project. So, I mean, you could sugarcoat this however you want. This is not good for the taxpayers of Kenosha County. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Supervisor Uhas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is not an easy budget, but I wasn't elected to stay away from tough decisions. Like last year, I attended every budget hearing and asked questions as well as observed. I'd like to remind some of you that this isn't Washington, D.C. We don't have to have a political leaning, nor should we. We should not have gridlock or political squabble. Unlike Washington, the work we do here has visible and immediate impacts on our neighbors. Investing wisely and governing responsibly should be the product of every budget. The people of the 18th District elected me to ensure that their tax dollars were invested into services that continue our commitment to a Kenosha County that is a safe place to work, play, and raise a family. This budget does this. However, while this budget keeps a commitment to fiscal responsibility and responsible government, some of you have advocated to kick the can down the road. Over $750,000 in capital improvements were removed during the budget discussions. While this may be politically expedient to those who think about their next election, this is a disservice to the next generation. While some of you will brag to your constituents about saving a nickel, we will have the same problem at the next budget, questioning and seeing these deferred costs higher than the original $750,000. Do you know who will bear the brunt of the expanded costs of delaying capital and infrastructure improvements? Taxpayers. Irresponsible governance yields no wins for anyone. If trending continues, by 2024, Kenosha County will be the third largest municipality in the state of Wisconsin. This is due in part to wise economic investments into infrastructure and to economy driving factors. We have quality roads, good infrastructure, and responsive services to provide momentum for businesses and economic growth. There is no reason to change our growth trajectory and positive fiscal climate to exacerbate empty partisan politics promises based on the next election. Finally, for some of you who have the most to say each year when this budget comes around, but are nowhere to be seen when it comes to engaging and learning about the services we fund in this budget. I ask, why are you here? I have dedicated over 72 hours, 9 vacation days to spend time in departments across Kenosha County government. From doing ride-alongs with the Sheriff's Department to spending an evening in 911 Dispatch Center, spending time in Public Works, Engineering, Parks Department, all the various departments housed at the Health and Human Services Building, the DA's office, Circuit Court, met with our judges, met and toured the Highway Department, the Clerk's Office, Register of Deeds, Land and Development, and other departments across Kenosha County. We are very fortunate to have civil servants who are eager to serve and follow neighbors in Kenosha County. I want to share a tidbit with you. I received a telephone call last night from a constituent in my district. This person shared with me that from 2012 to 2018, the portion of his county tax bill increased a total of $41 over 7 years. $41 over 7 years. That's less than $7 a year for quality services provided by Kenosha County. That, people, is responsible fiscal government. Quality services continue to be provided without burdening the taxpayer. Quality Sheriff Department services, social services, beautiful parks all fall under this responsible budget, and that's what is demanded and expected from our constituents. Again, I ask, if you're not for the budget, why are you here? Are you not here to support our deputies? Are you not here to support the Sheriff's Department? Are you not here to ensure our roads are paved? Are you not here to help provide health and human services to constituents who may need them? I'm here to get the job done and for the people of the 18th District and of Kenosha County who expect us to deliver for the people, by the people, and of the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Decker, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to make a comment about the careful 5-year CIP planning that the county does. That this year, the 2020 CIP bonding was $10,058,129 over what was put in last year's budget. So to say that we're carefully watching what we spend and put in our CIP budget, that's just, to be over $10 million is just the opposite of being careful planning. Let's see, I have this all written down. The building improvements in the job center, $10,000 increase this year over what was in last year's CIP. Remodel the district attorney and juvenile intake building, $230,000 over last year. Building space design at the KCC, $50,000 over last year. Remodel the 3rd floor KCAB building, $30,000 over last year. This is all projected in our carefully planned 5-year CIP. Building improvements, KCC, $50,000 over last year. 1-ton truck, $60,000 over last year. Plumbing replacement, $180,000 over last year. Secure barrier for lobby at the KCDC, $50,000 over last year. Building improvements at the Civic Center, $209,000 over last year's CIP projection. Ceremonial courtroom restoration, $250,000 over last year. That wasn't even in the budget last year, I'd like to point out. Generator monitoring system, $130,000. Civic Center development, $250,000. Moisture infiltration mitigation, $250,000. A pickup truck, $45,000. Building improvements in the PSB, $45,000. Restroom replacements in the Gulf, $36,000. Playground equipment in parks, $70,000. Mowers and equipment, $21,000. Pike River South Branch study expense, $260,000. Pike River North Branch restoration, $80,000. Park projects design costs, $196,000. Parkland development expense, $50,000. Building improvements at the Kemper Center, $91,000 over last year's CIP. Let's go on. Triaxle trucks, $780,000. 1-ton trucks, $100,000. Pickup trucks, 50 grand. Wheel loaders, 50 grand. Air compressors, 50 grand. Transportation infrastructure improvements, $539,679. Highway A roundabout expense, $255,000. Highway F reconstruction, $1,773,000. Highway S reconstruction, $1,835,000. Passenger vehicles, $46,500. Portable radios, $5,750. Electronic fingerprint system, $31,000. Operations equipment, $142,800. IT projects, $300,000 over last year's CIP. Joint services ERP system, $200,000 over last year's CIP. Brookside equipment, $58,400 over last year. And Brookside building improvements is $108,000 over last year, for a total, like I said, of $10,058,129. To say that we carefully watched the CIP over 5 years is just ridiculous. And when I just read off over $10 million in spending that were not in last year's CIP budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Decker. Supervisor Rodriguez, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to address Supervisor Uhas's comments on if we're not here for the budget, then why are we on the county board? Our job here on the county board is to be stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, not to simply pass the county executive's budget blindly without reason and without question. That is not our job. Our job is to ask questions, and our job, like Supervisor Rose has stated, is to make concessions with each other to get to a budget that is not perfect but will do. Everybody keeps addressing these interest rates being at a historic low. That's fine and dandy, but what we need to address is, and some of those in these chambers tonight have already said this, they've said it outside the county board and their personal lives, what have you, that maybe a recession is coming. And when we don't bond, we're taking future debt services out of those budgets. And we're bonding year after year after year, hoping and praying that the economy stays the way it is today. What do we do 10 years from now, 2 years from now, a month from now, when we don't know when or if the economy is going to crash, and we've got to put that debt service on the taxpayers? Maybe they're losing their jobs. Maybe they're losing their homes. What do we do at that point? Do we go back to our districts and say, well, back when we bonded for it, the interest rates were so low, so we just took out as much as we could? That's an asinine way of thinking, and for that reason, I won't be supporting adding the $750,000 back into the bonding. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rodriguez. Supervisor Franco, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern in general is that of the procedural aspect of this whole thing. I think we're setting a bad precedent. The original bonding passed the Public Works Committee and it passed the Finance Committee. It was only on the last day before the budget finalization that this apparent deal was struck. And frankly, I didn't find about it till after the fact. Supervisor Elverman, who's the chair of the committee, wasn't present in the negotiations. I just think this is a really bad precedent to set. I mean, what's the purpose of having a committee hearing if the vote of the committee is going to be virtually nullified by a last-minute deal? I thought this was a democracy, and if you don't win in committee and you don't win, the committee or the finance vote was 6-1, Supervisor Gens mentioned, but then none of that mattered because there was a last-minute deal struck. Frankly, I'm an advocate of regular order, and whether this is a deferral or whether this is a bonding deferral or a bonding cut, we could discuss that. But for me, I have a hard time with how this went down. And so I'm going to be supporting Supervisor Gens' motion.
That is Supervisor Franco? Supervisor Franco, is that it?
Yeah,
okay,
sorry.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do is there's a lot of lights here. I'm going to clear the board, and the supervisors that still want to continue to discuss this issue. And there are. Supervisor Noodle, you have the floor.
Thank you. Well, actually, I did not have any intention to speak at all anymore due to the fact that we had a lot of discussions at the committee meetings, which I attend every single one, the finance meeting, which I attended every single one. Again, there was a lot of discussions. However, in committee and now, as a lot of emphasis has been put on the roof, that we gotta do the roof. We're doing the roof, and we do the roof and then we put the HVAC. After that, it's gonna do damage or whatever. Well, the roof is not projected to be put in until 2022 and 2023. So to say that, that's completely wrong. The other thing is say that there was a target of $1 million to reduce $1 million, which was pretty much taken out of the air. That's not true. That was never the case or anything. There was a lot of discussion, a lot of effort put in. Department heads were involved to see the feasibility of not doing some of the work in there now, and that was all done with that. And then I know Supervisor Franco said that it passed 6-1. Yes, that was 6-1, the final resolution of the Finance Committee. So that's what it did. And that's pretty much what happened. So therefore, I'm not going to support this amendment. Again, I stress the fact there was a lot of hours, a lot of time put in. Everything should be commended on that. And it's about time that we put this behind. Let's vote in the way it was presented, and let's go on with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Nitto. Supervisor Gens, you have the floor.
Okay, this will be brief and the last time I
Thank you.
speak. I could not agree with Supervisor Rodriguez more. His points were exactly what I'm talking about. So when he said, well, in the future, there might be a recession. You know, what are we going to do then? Why should we tie us into this bonding now? Well, now is when you bond for the projects and you get the money. You don't have to go out and get it later. So you can cut bonding later, reduce bonding later, defer bonding later to a better time. So I agree. That uncertainty is exactly why we should bond. So I could not agree more, up until you said my reasoning was asinine. But I have been called worse, so that's fine. But that's exactly why we should bond this now. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So let me clear the board. Hold on, Supervisor Rose. I'm going to pass the gavel and speak on this issue. And I rarely do that, but I'm going to do it tonight. I agree with Supervisor Rose, with all due respect to Supervisor Gens and Alverman. I don't believe there was a deal cut for anybody that thinks there was. I believe there was a compromise on this budget. I believe that there was a lot of hard work put into this budget. I believe the Finance Administration Committee approved the budget that we're looking at tonight. And for that reason, I'm going to support the budget that was presented by the Finance Administration Committee. So that's what I wanted to speak on tonight. The aspect of numbers, we can spend all night on numbers. But I do believe that things that were accomplished in this budget have set, differences aside. I think we accomplished, we think our employees are important. We understand that they're important. We understand that they need raises. We understand that we need to do roads. We understand that our law enforcement is a key integral part of what we do here in Kenosha County. We support our sheriff's department. We support the sheriff. I think that's getting missed on everything, on a few numbers. So I just wanted to speak on that. And with that, I will take my gavel back. And if any other supervisors have any comments or concerns, they can. Seeing none, there's been a roll call requested. So, if you are in favor of putting the original bonding of roughly $750,000 back in the budget, which was Supervisor Gentz's amendment, you will vote yes. If you are not in favor, you will vote no. Supervisor Noodle. The suspense. Okay, so the amendment fails. We are back on the original budget. Does anybody have any discussion on the original budget? If that, can I have a roll call requested? There's a roll call requested. We are going to vote on the budget that was presented by the Finance and Administration Committee to this county board. Yes, if you are in favor. No, if you are not. Budget passes. Moving on, County Clerk.
New business, excuse me. New business, Resolution 46, one reading from the Finance and Administration Committee, an initial resolution authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $12,865,000 general obligation promissory notes for budgeted capital projects, including road and highway improvements.
Supervisor Rose, you have the floor.
I move the resolution.
Thank you. I have a motion by Supervisor Rose, a second by Supervisor Ron Frederick. Supervisor Rose.
All right, this is the financing of those things that the committee has authorized, and they will be sold at the appropriate time.
Thank you. We do have discussion. Supervisor Decker, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have a question through the chair to, I believe, Supervisor Rose. I'm not sure if you can answer this question. The handout we received from Ellers on our desk states it's for $13,575,000. Will we be getting an updated version of this with the 12,865?
There are two pre-sale reports before you.
Yes.
So that's the total funding. Does that answer?
Well, no, because one has $8,555,000 general obligation bonds,
Yes.
and the other has the $13,575 general obligation notes.
Correct. And that finances the capital projects that the board has authorized.
I don't see anything. The resolution says it's for $12,865,000 general obligation promissory notes. Nothing about bonds.
I believe that the balance was, and I can be corrected by the finance director, I believe that the balance was previously authorized by the board.
Why don't we have the finance director, Patty? Can you
Thank
please
you.
come up and speak on this? Thank you. That way, I want to clarify any confusion. Because Supervisor Decker has a point there. I think we need to clarify this, please.
Certainly. Supervisor Rose was correct. The initial resolution is for the amounts that have not been authorized already by the board. The board authorized various bonding and CABA notes in previous initial resolutions. So the only items that have to come through as the initial resolution are those items that are on the project list that do not have prior authorization. So if you look at the list on the back of the pre-sale reports, and the lists are the same, either report you're looking at, there are items on page 2 that are in red and boxes at the bottom that explain what initial resolutions those items are being drawn from, leaving a total of $12,865,000 for the initial resolution that's being presented this evening.
Now that I see the numbers, thank you very much.
Thank you, Patty.
Sorry I didn't understand at first, Terry. Supervisor Rose.
Anything else, Supervisor Decker?
Nope, that's it. Thank
Okay,
you.
You bet. One second. Supervisor Poole, you have the floor.
Thank you. Will we be voting on these separately or together?
I believe it's one vote for, Patty, come back up, please. Let's make sure everybody's clear. So I don't want to tell you the wrong.
The vote is for the initial resolution of $12,865,000. The pre-sale reports represent what we will go to market for, or our expectation of going to market for. By the time we actually come forward with an authorizing resolution, which is usually in July, we may have pushed back some projects. We may have different numbers that we actually come forward with at that time. But based on the budget as it has been put together, the debt issue will be for those two pre-sale reports that you have. But what we need for initial resolution is $12,865,000.
Answer your question, Supervisor Poole?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to clear the board here. Is there any other discussion in regards to this item? Any other discussion? Seeing none, there's a roll call that's been requested. To be clear, if you are in favor of the bonding portion of this budgetary process, you will vote yes. If you're not in favor, you vote no. That passes. 19-4. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn. I have a motion to adjourn by Supervisor Uhas, a second by Supervisor Nudo. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work.